Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our program today. I'm Michael Hussey, Interim Dean at Widener Law Commonwealth, and it's great to have you here at the second session of our annual Emergency Medical Services Provider Programming. At the law school, we're committed to first responders and have a first responders initiative. In that initiative, we support them in their studies and provide for what they need to be successful attorneys when they graduate, to provide for their financial support needs, their emotional support needs, and any other needs they may have while they are students. We are grateful to the law firm of Page, Wolfberg, and Wirth, who generously funds a scholarship that we give each year to one of our first responders. I'm delighted that you were able to join us today, and I hope you get as much out of the program as I expect to. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Doug Wolfberg. I will be serving as the moderator for today's panel. I was also privileged to serve as the moderator for last week and will be for next week's as well. This is the second in a three-part series on emergency medical services in the law. We want to first thank Widener Law School, Commonwealth Law School, for hosting this for the second year now, and their commitment to first responders, EMS providers, law enforcement, the military, is really second to none in virtually all law schools throughout the United States. Widener certainly leads in terms of its commitment to those constituencies, and we very much appreciate their strong support of the veterans and military and first response communities. So I would like to thank Dean Hussey for his support. I would like to thank the immediate past dean, Christian Johnson, who spearheaded this program under his leadership last year, and Dean Hussey for continuing that leadership this year. I would also like to thank Joy Boudreau and Brian Fernbaugh from Widener for their assistance with all the technical aspects of the program, and also thank Corinna Wilson, who has coordinated both years' programs. I would also like to do a quick happy birthday shout out to next week's panelist, Heather Sherrar, who is the Executive Director of the Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania, and you'll be meeting her next week. Again, my name is Doug Wolfberg. I am a proud Widener Law graduate. On the I Love Me wall behind me here, I proudly hang a diploma from Widener University's law school, and it seemed like about 100 years ago, but certainly was a great education and a wonderful springboard to my career, which includes being a founding partner of PWW, Page, Wolfberg, and Wirth, and myself having had a long career in emergency medical services prior to that. So as I mentioned, we are in the second of a three-part program. Last week's panel discussion was on legislative leadership, and we were very privileged to have three of the four chairs of the House and Senate Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committees. And the video from that session is available online and will also be broadcast on PCN, and we appreciate their support of this program as well. Next Friday, October 30th, will be the third and final panel, which is a law and policy panel, which will feature some statewide association representatives, as well as the state emergency medical services director. The format for today, we are going to start with a keynote address by Steve Wirth, who I will introduce here momentarily. We will then have brief panelist presentations featuring three panelists who I will introduce fully after Steve's keynote address. But those panelists include David Sanko and Nate Silcox, as well as, oh my goodness, Barry Albertson, my friend of 30-some years. We will be getting to the panelists and their introductory remarks here after Steve's keynote. So first, I would like to introduce Steve Wirth. I would also like to ask two things of all the attendees here. If you could please keep your microphones on mute throughout the program. Feel free to keep your cameras on if you'd like. We like to see your smiling faces. That's good feedback for Zoom presenters since we can't all meet in person, but that's certainly up to you. But do keep your microphones on mute. Any questions that you would like to ask during today's, throughout the presentation, feel free to ask those questions at any time. We would ask that you put those in the chat feature on Zoom. I will be monitoring those questions throughout the presentation. I will then ask those questions on air of the appropriate panelist. If you would like your question directed to a particular panelist, please state that in your question and I will be happy to direct it to that person. Otherwise, if it's just a general question, I will field that to an appropriate panelist or panelists. So please remember, you can do that and put those questions in there anytime. You don't have to wait for the Q&A session to start asking any questions that you might have. So without any further ado, I'm proud to introduce my law partner, Steve Wirth, and he'll tell you a little bit more about his background, but he's been in EMS since dinosaurs roamed the earth, and also an esteemed attorney and somebody I'm very proud to call my partner. And without, again, any further ado, please welcome Steve Wirth. Partner, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug, for the kind introduction. Can you all see my screen? Excellent, very good. Well, I also have got 15 minutes, and Doug, just so you know, I have the timer running here. So I'm also very glad that Doug decided to go to Widener Law School, or we may not have gotten together to form our law firm venture. So great to be here with you all folks today on this Friday morning, and I really appreciate you attending. Just want to tell you a little bit about my background. I come from a beautiful corner of Pennsylvania, the southwest corner of Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, the largest county geographically, in a little place called Nippenose Valley, where I started at age 15 in the Nippenose Valley Volunteer Fire Company, became an EMT at the age of 16, and then was very fortunate to become a part of the very first paramedic class in Williamsport back in 1979. This is me beside our first rescue truck in Nippenose Valley. I was able to get our company out of the just traditional fire service and into the first response service. We were one of the first QRS units in Lycoming County, and very proud of that, and very proud of my volunteer roots that go way back to the mid-1970s. Yes, I even had a mustache and some hair back then from that first paramedic class in 1979, where Walt Sinatra actually taught us disco back then as part of our recreational activities. I spent a few years in Williamsport as a street medic and also then running the paramedic program as a paramedic instructor. And then I was recruited to go to Erie, Pennsylvania to help start the joint venture up there between the city of Erie and 3 hospitals. And talk about collaboration, the topic of today's talk. But that was a wonderful collaborative venture between hospitals and city government, and also the volunteer fire companies throughout that section of Erie County at the time. So very proud of that 9 years there. And then I got this crazy notion to go to law school, which I did at DeKalb Law in Pittsburgh. And then moved over to Harrisburg and spent about 16 years active with the Hamden Township Volunteer Fire Rescue on the West Shore. And I'm a life member there and just recently retired as safety officer a few years ago. So that's a little bit about my background. And just start off by talking about 2020. It certainly has had its challenge, folks. And I think this slide sort of sums it up very well. If 2020 was an ice cream truck, it would be carrying liver and onions. Most people don't like that. It's been a very difficult year for everybody. Amazing stresses, especially for our folks in the field. Our EMS folks, our first responders. We've got a double whammy, folks. We've been hit with not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but the social unrest after the George Floyd death. And that has put all public safety officers, fire, police, EMS, under great scrutiny by the public, and it's causing a lot of issues for us. So it's very tough. We're seeing EMS personnel leaving the profession, unfortunately, because of COVID-19 and the other hazards that go with it. And we know that our work is so much more dangerous than traditional work. This study that came out last year said that EMS work is 22 times more dangerous than the typical job. Greater risk of getting injured and assaulted in an EMS job. So we got a lot of issues to worry about. We got things to be concerned about. And as leaders, we got to step up to the plate and we got to work at it. We got to be positive. We got to be pragmatic. And we really need collaborative leadership today more than ever. We all know the history of EMS and the fire service in Pennsylvania has been a history of parochialism to some extent, and people always not getting along, and companies doing their own thing and not really talking to their neighbors. But a lot of that has really changed in recent years, and we certainly need leaders who are willing to step outside of their organization, outside their comfort zone, and cross that boundary, to get across that divide, to meet with other agencies, to meet with the government officials, to meet with the hospitals, and to work together collaboratively to improve EMS in our communities. Now, we have different boundaries. We're talking about boundary spanning leadership here. We got the vertical boundaries within our organizations from top to bottom, bottom up. We have horizontal boundaries across those organizations between departments and between departments and other agencies that we work with. And we got shareholder boundaries. We got more shareholders than just about any other type of operation. We got hospitals, police, fire, EMS. We've got the citizens, we got the public, we got the patients, so many other agencies we work with, and we have demographic boundaries. It's no secret that we don't always reflect the makeup of the communities that we serve, and we have to deal with that, and we have to be positive in working with everybody in our community. And of course, in Pennsylvania, we have amazing stretch of land, urban and rural boundaries that we deal with as well. So what is boundary spanning leadership? It's really taking that leap here, as Rudolph doesn't want to do in this particular case, but it's really the ability, the capability to create direction, alignment, and commitment across those boundaries in service of a higher vision or goal. It's working together toward that higher vision or goal. That's what it's all about, the ability to see the big picture. And as we all know, often leadership stops where those boundaries start. We don't go outside of our organization as often as we should to work with our neighbors and other agencies. But really in today's world, the exact opposite is what we need. We need the ability for leaders to bridge those boundaries between groups in service of a larger vision or goal. Absolutely. And we got some positive things happening that help us with this boundary spanning leadership that's required. We've got this pandemic that's really brought us all together. It truly has. Organizations are working together now more than ever before, and that's a good thing. We have this common bond in fighting this virus, and that's the kind of thing that's going to help bring us together and allow us to more than just survive this pandemic, but to actually thrive. Because if anyone's given the choice, they want to thrive. We want to do better. We want to take what we're doing now and improve upon it and make it better for our communities. So why are these skills now required more than ever? Well, the old your space, my space kind of thing, separation, we've got that boundary, because when we bring those things together and come together, a lot of positive things can truly happen. And boundary spanning leadership is so important because it allows us to tap into the diverse expertise of others, to get other people's perspectives, the other agencies, the other groups who have that and share that same common goal. It creates synergy. The power of multiple groups getting together is certainly much greater than just the power of them individually. And it reduces costs and risks because now we're sharing those costs and those risks. And now we can innovate because we got a lot of great ideas being brought to the table, and we have that great potential for innovation. And if we don't if we don't span those boundaries, we're not going to have any positive growth. We're going to have the old organizational silos develop. This is my lane, you don't step into it, I don't step into yours, a group thought process without looking at new ideas or innovation. So I want to just share 3 leadership strategies to help develop those boundary spanning skills very quickly this morning. And these come basically adapted from this excellent book called Boundary Spanning Leadership by Chris Ernst and Donna Crobot Mason from McGraw-Hill. Excellent book. I highly recommend it if you want to look at improving some of your skills and developing them. But 3 strategies are: number 1, reflecting, fostering respect; number 2, connecting and building trust; and the third one, mobilizing and developing that sense of community. So let's start with reflecting, fostering respect. Well, we all know respect is a two-way street. You have to give someone respect to get respect in return, and that's important. That means you got to meet with the others. You got to sensitize each group to the other's needs, their values, beliefs, and preferences. You got to get to know where they're coming from. You got to identify the differences you have as well as those similarities between those groups, and you got to help each group understand the identity of the other. And once we get to know each other, a lot of walls can be broken down, a lot of boundaries can be overcome. And it's all about practicing empathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, trying for a moment, not looking at the problem through your own eyes, but looking at it through that other person's eyes and appreciating where they're coming from, because now you start to get to know them and understand their concerns. And unfortunately, in public safety, EMS, and the fire service, we tend to be, judgmental. We see people in their worst moments in society, and we gotta basically put that aside, because when we're judgmental, we're not gonna accomplish the goals we need to accomplish. We gotta actively listen to others. I like to say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We only learn by listening. And that's another way we get to learn and meet each other and learn about each other. And when we communicate, when we listen to what others are saying, they're going to start revealing and telling us stuff. And that's when we get that sense of understanding between 2 groups or 2 entities. And ultimately, it allows you to talk about that elephant in the room, like we're talking about some of those elephants in this conference and some of the innovative ideas for moving EMS into the future in our Commonwealth. And ultimately, we get that awareness, positive regard. It develops when those groups understand their similarities and differences. The second one is connecting, building trust. That's absolutely important. We have to foster and forge common ground among our groups. We got to connect with people outside of our traditional role, our work role. We got to get to know other people as individuals. And that's where the chicken barbecues and those social events that we are all accustomed to can really help. Getting to meet people outside of the response, outside of the duties that we provide in terms of our duties to the citizens, and getting to know each other personally. And when you do that, you got to be honest and transparent. You seem transparent, but I can see you're plotting something in the background here. If you're not honest, it's going to destroy any relationships that you attempted to build. And yes, that creates a vulnerability. When you're honest and transparent, it makes you a little vulnerable, but you got to do it anyway, because honesty is not the only policy. It truly is the best policy in dealing with others. So that brings that connectivity, mutual confidence, and integrity then develops when those boundaries are suspended then, and new relationships get to be built outside of the traditional work roles, if you will. The third boundary spanning leadership strategy is mobilizing, developing community. When community exists, groups may have widely different sets of expectations, values, and expertise, yet they feel committed to taking joint action on behalf of a larger common purpose. And wow, what bigger common purpose than providing EMS for our community, helping patients, helping our citizens, helping the public. And this is from our friends at EmergiCare. Yes, that's what it's all about. We have the absolute best common purpose that we can imagine, and that's something that should energize all of us to work together and mobilize everybody together. Bring them into the room. This is a slide from one of these town hall meetings that was put together by the Veterans Affairs Committee, Emergency Preparedness Committee. Wonderful, 40, 50, 60 people on there sharing their ideas and concerns. What a great way to mobilize. Because we got to recognize that we all may take different paths to get to the same goal, but we're all going to get there together. We just might have different approaches to get there, but that's the power of boundary spanning leadership. We recognize those differences and we can use them to our advantage. So the result is renewal, alternative futures, emergent possibilities, and develop as we cross-cut and transform our organizations into a whole new level of cooperation. And look at this, regional public safety authorities. Who would have imagined? We couldn't have even been talking about this 10 years ago. A new way forward, as this Senate of Pennsylvania document says. Wonderful stuff, really. And the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee has done such great work in these roundtable discussions. And that's exhibiting boundary spanning leadership, bringing people into the room, so to speak. And, that was impossible some years ago, but, it's kind of fun to now do the impossible, the positive things that are moving EMS forward in our great Commonwealth. And ultimately, with collaboration, when you share ideas among various groups with different backgrounds and different experiences, that truly helps come up with the best idea possible. And that's what collaboration's all about, bringing people together, sharing information, inspiring others, trusting each other, supporting each other, And that's what boundary spanning leadership is all about. Now, one last tip from my 40 years or so of being in EMS, what has allowed me to survive? Somebody asked me that once, how did you stay in this business so long? And I think one way I have stayed sane is that I try not to take things personally. What we do is very tough. Whatever we do in EMS, it's tough work. But we don't want to take things personally, because by taking things personally, you set yourself up to suffer for nothing. And always remember, if somebody's criticizing you, don't let their reality become your reality, okay? That's their perspective, not yours. And you really get a huge amount of freedom when you realize this and you don't take things personally, and you just move forward on the mission toward that common goal, and occasionally letting things in one ear and out the other. So recently, in the midst of the pandemic, the New York Times published this excellent article on a study about resiliency, that ability to bounce back from adversity. And boy, we're sure having our share of adversity with this pandemic. But what they found in this study is that many, many resilient people learn to carefully accept what they can't change about a situation, and then ask themselves what they can actually change. So it's a realistic view of life, really, is what resilient people have. And when we look at things like SR6 with dozens of wonderful recommendations, I mean, if we could turn on the switch and all those recommendations came into existence tomorrow, wow, we'd have solved all our problems. But it doesn't work that way. It's baby steps. Small steps equal sure success, a little bit at a time. And as we heard last week, some great things have happened that 10 years ago would never have happened legislatively to support our first responders and EMS practitioners out in the field. So very, very important. USA Today did a study about 15 years ago asking people, you know, are you proud of your job? Because they found that being proud of your job, it really doesn't matter what the stranger at the party thinks. You know, you think that, do they really care? Yes, they do. People do care about the job you provide to society. Individual citizens, they rate jobs based on levels of prestige. And at the end of the day, firefighters, EMS workers, police officers, we're in the top 3 of the most prestigious jobs in society. When you ask them what jobs are the best jobs, these are the jobs. Unfortunately, lawyers, used car salespeople, and insurance agents are near the bottom of the least prestigious. So basically, they found that less than 1 in 10 chance that the person you talk to at the party or on the street believes that your job carries great prestige. But we're in that 1 in 10. We're at the top. Firefighters, EMS, police, we're up there serving the public. The public loves us. How often when that child says to you, I want to be a paramedic when I grow up? Wow, how does that make you feel? And what this study found was that how much prestige others assign to your job plays a sizable role in our own job satisfaction. When that little kid says, wow, I want to be a paramedic like you when I grow up, that makes us feel good. It's rewarding. We feel like, wow, this is a wonderful job. I can't think of a better job on the planet Earth. So the public really does appreciate what we do. And we got to remember that. They look at us with great prestige. They see us as people who are there to help them out of a difficult situation whenever they call. And that's a wonderful thing. And that's really come to the forefront here in this pandemic, when we walk around, drive around, ride our bikes around, and see these kinds of signs in the front yards of people throughout our great Commonwealth, recognizing the role of first responders and essential workers. Heck, you can even go to Amazon.com and buy these signs now to recognize first responders. So what a wonderful thing, and we should tap into that. Because where else can you find work that has such an immediate and positive impact on human life? I can't think of another job than what we do in EMS in terms of immediate and positive impact on human life. And our late great partner, James O. Page, in one of his last speeches entitled Saving Our Society, once again, a man ahead of his time, LA County Battalion Fire Chief, publisher, author, lawyer, technical advisor to the great show Emergency, said this: there's a great power in small acts of human kindness amidst social upheaval and barbarism. And you have the opportunity to exercise that kind of power every single day. Boy, what a great thing to be thinking about today, given what society is going through today. So it's those little acts of kindness that make a difference. Working with each other in a positive way, listening to the other person's concerns seriously, considering what they have to say. These are the kinds of things that we can do to help our communities. So with that, I want to thank everybody for all that you do in your communities throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You truly are the heroes of your towns, your boroughs, your cities, your townships. And thankfully, you're there when the calls come in, because you are the lifeblood of the community and the group that people call when they need help. So that's it. I did it. And I think I did go 3 minutes over, Doug. Sorry about that, but that's a wrap. So thanks very much for having me, and I appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. And this always reminds me why you're one of my favorite presenters. So I appreciate that. And these were very, I think, beneficial words for everybody in public safety or any aspect of leadership for that matter.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So I would now like to introduce our first of our three panelists. And this is in no particular order, folks, but I would like to start by introducing Nathan Silcox. And he has been a great friend to this program and a great friend to EMS and public safety in the Commonwealth. And I just can't think of too many panelists who have a better background to share than his. He has had over 25 years of experience in public policy at both the state and the local levels. And his day job is he's executive director of the Pennsylvania Senate Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee, one of our key committees for Senator Regan, who we heard from last week. And during his time in the Senate, Nate has served as the executive director of the Aging and Youth Communications and Technology and the local government committees, which gives him particular insight to what we're talking about today. He's also served in the Senate leadership offices, assisting the Senate Majority Whip in the performance of floor duties and working for the Senate Majority Caucus Secretary as a legislative director. And in these capacities, Nate has had a major role in the passage of laws, including reauthorization of the state 911 law, allowing municipalities to establish tax credits for first responders, strengthening National Guard educational assistance, permitting counties to establish regional booking centers, expanding the local government capital project loan fund, permitting students with severe allergies carry EpiPens to schools, authorizing respite care programs for senior citizens, and Chloe's Law, protecting children with Down syndrome. Nate started his career as a member of Governor Tom Ridge's team in the Department of Education, helping to establish academic standards and ensure school safety and to provide for additional educational opportunities. Now, also relevant to today, as if that experience isn't broad enough, Nate is also a Hamden Township commissioner, and he founded and chaired the Hamden Township Veterans Recognition Committee, which is leading the effort to complete a Veterans Park and Memorial project. He also established an annual Hampton Commissioners Breakfast with business leaders and Hampton Township Community Shred Day. During his tenure as liaison to the Golf Advisory Board, Armitage Golf Course was voted simply the best 6 out of 7 years. Capital Region COG, Council of Governments, won the Harrisburg Chamber's 2013 Government Leader of the Year Award, and the Planning Commission, which completed its first comprehensive plan since 1994, has been lauded by Cumberland County as one of the area's best. Meanwhile, the Volunteer Fire Company, which responds to the second highest number of calls in the county each year, partnered with Cumberland Valley High School and HAC on a Fire 101 course, which has been replicated. Nate is also involved with the update of the First Class Township Code, which Hampton Township operates under. And in 2018, Nate received the Council of Governments Perry Albert Distinguished Service Award for his dedicated service to the community. And he will serve as president of the State Association of Township Commissioners in October 2020, which we're in. So I guess I can say congratulations, Mr. President. With that amazingly impressive background, please welcome Nate Silcox. My friend, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Doug, and thanks for the introduction. Thanks to Widener Law School for hosting this important forum, and particularly for holding it on an annual basis. I think it's very important to take a look back at where we were and now where we're at this year. I will note that my wife is a Widener Law grad, albeit from the Delaware campus. We have that hanging up on another part of the room here. I won't flip the camera to show it, but appreciate everything Widener Law does. As Doug mentioned, I have several different hats I wear as it relates to fire and EMS, and they do overlap pretty nicely. In terms of the Senate, I have served as the executive director of the Senate Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee since 2015. And it was under Chairman Randy Volukovich that the SR6 Commission was formed and voted on 92 recommendations to improve our fire and EMS services. And now under Chairman Mike Regan, we have implemented a good number of the recommendations. And if you were here last week or viewed the program, you heard Senator Regan give a preview of what was likely to happen this week in the General Assembly. And just to recap, it was a very good week for our fire and EMS community. House Bill 1838, which was sent to the governor, provides an infusion of $11 million to our EMS community through the MSOF fund. And then 2 weeks ago, Senator Regan took provisions from 13 House and Senate fire and EMS bills and inserted them into House Bill 1673. And this week, the Senate and the House unanimously passed the omnibus measure. It has 5 main areas. In terms of the state fire commissioner, it requires confirmation of the fire commissioner, and the fire commissioner will now report directly to the governor. It reconstitutes the fire advisory board, and we'll have them look at fire relief revenues as a first step. The fire and EMS grant program, it has been reauthorized under this bill. It extends it until June 30th of 2024. EMS agencies will be allowed to spend their grants on recruitment and retention, community risk reduction, and revenue losses in addition to previous allowable expenditures. Similar to fire, EMS agencies will now be able to be eligible for 1% loans if they consolidate. In regards to the Volunteer Loan Assistance Program, it's going to be renamed the Fire and EMS Loan Program, and loan amounts will be increased and indexed with inflation on an annual basis, biannual basis. The Fire Relief Program, it places the fire relief under the Fire Commissioner instead of the Auditor General. The Fire Commissioner will distribute the funds and articulate the allowable uses while the Auditor General will continue to perform audits. And finally, the first responder tax credits. In 2016, we authorized municipalities to provide earned income or property tax credits to volunteer first responders. And under this bill, counties and school districts will be permitted to establish property tax credits. And in addition, municipalities via COGS, the Council of Governments, will be able to do this jointly. The Senate and House also passed Senate Bill 1281, which renames the Steer Clear Law the Move Over Law and increases fines if motorists don't move over when there is an accident or a roadway, and requires the PennDOT to educate drivers on the new law. These measures were all done this week, and they're in addition to House Bill 1459, the First Responder Mental Wellness and Stress Management Program, Senate Bill 146, which enhanced online fire and training through the Fire Commissioner's Office, and House Bill 1869, which permits the Department of Health to provide waivers to EMS for ambulance staffing requirements, as well as Senate Bill 1122, which provides $50 million in CARES funding to our fire and EMS. Now, at the state level, there's much work that still needs to be done, and several measures have been initiated, including our work on the countywide public safety authority concept that Steve had mentioned. The county commissioners had a task force that did great work on this issue, and a bipartisan group of senators, including Senators Carney, Senator Tom Killian, Senator Lisa Baker, and my boss, Senator Regan, have introduced Senate Bill 1274. And hopefully we can begin the process on that, at least get in good shape here for the upcoming legislative session. Hopefully hazard pay will be in the mix of the finalized state budget that will be worked on in November. And we'll also be working to establish a statewide system of medals commendation for our fire and EMS community. I'm looking forward to working with the director of the Bureau of EMS, the Ambulance Association, the EMS Council, Fire and Emergency Services Institute to continue advancing the ball here for our EMS community. So that's that hat. And then in regards to Hamden Township, I am a commissioner in Hamden Township, which is Cumberland County's largest municipality at 30,000 residents. I serve as the vice chairman of the board and am the liaison to the fire company, which is where, as you heard earlier, Steve, Wirth lives and served as a deputy chief without the mustache, though. But we appreciate Steve's service in that capacity. We operate a professionally licensed paid EMS department 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to meet the needs of our residents, to support surrounding communities when their EMS crews are overtasked as well. Our EMS department responds to an average of 3,000 dispatch calls a year. If a member of the community has a medical emergency and Hamden EMS is dispatched, it's EMTs are there to respond and provide critical care to the patient. This service obviously comes with a significant cost. All told, our annual budget for EMS exceeds $1 million. This includes labor costs, insurances, utilities, and maintenance of the EMS station, medical supplies, continuing education, fuel for ambulances, and many other recurring expenses, and now PPE on top of all that, or additional PPE on top of all that. Capital expenses add significantly, and as many of you know, a new ambulance averages $200,000, and it has a lifespan of approximately 7 years. In an attempt to cover the operating capital costs associated with this, the township assesses fees to the patient who receives emergency medical care in the time of their need. The expense associated with an average ambulance trip in Hamden Township is between $800 and $1,000. This fee is billed to the patient and, if applicable, their insurance carrier. However, in Pennsylvania, insurance companies are not required to make direct payments to EMS provider like they are with other providers in the healthcare industry. Rather, insurance companies make payments directly to the patient who is provided with care. The issue with this practice is it becomes very time consuming and oftentimes impossible to obtain that payment from the patient once they have received the funds from their insurance company. In the end, this means that tens of thousands of dollars are issued by insurance companies directly to the patient for services provided by our EMS staff, and the township never receives fair compensation for this much needed service. As such, we are advocating for House Bill 1347, which would require insurance providers to make direct and full payment for EMS services to the township rather than the payment. This would aid in increasing the financial challenges in operating EMS services and streamlining the billing collections process. So that's a little flavor for what we're facing in Hamden, what we're pushing for. As Doug mentioned, next week I'll become the president of the State Association of Township Commissioners, which works hand in hand here with the Township Supervisors Association, which is Dave Sanko's operation. We work well together here on issues at the statewide level, and we're looking forward to continuing to push for legislation such as House Bill 1347, as well as some of these other measures that are at the state level assisting our first responders. So thank you very much for having me today. I look forward to answering any questions when the time comes.
Excellent, Nate. Thank you so much. Please do stand by for when we get into the Q&A portion. I have to add, for 25 of the 30 years I've lived in the Capital Region, I too have been a resident of Hamden Township. Although, sorry, I jumped ship about 2 years ago. Still a West Shore resident, but in any event, it is a wonderful municipality, and just probably one of the best managed, I would say, municipalities in Pennsylvania, quite honestly. So Nate, thank you so much. Now it is my privilege to hear someone you've already heard referred to introduce somebody you've heard referred to, and that is David Sanko, who has been the executive director of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors since January of 2010, and is the only the fifth chief executive in the association's nearly 100-year history. And I didn't know the association roots went back that long, so that's wonderful. In this role, he leads a staff of dozens of subject matter experts delivering member services, overall fiscal management, educational services, communications and publications. He coordinates and directs the association's policy development and legislative agenda, and guides various member insurance programs and services. A common sense advocate for local government, David has a broad background in state and local government, including stints as Chief Operating Officer for Bucks County, Director of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency under Governor Rendell, and Chief of Staff and Senior Counselor for Governor Mark Schweiker while he was both governor and lieutenant governor. So talk about another deep well of experience here, ladies and gentlemen. We are extremely fortunate to have Mr. Sanko with us. So, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate the introduction. I want to also join thanking Widener for sponsoring this and for including local governments in the prospect, because we indeed are partners in the trenches with providers. And it's great to be here to talk about the problems and challenges we have. But before we get to that, I want to thank all of you for your service and doing what you do to make your communities safe places to live, work, and raise families, whether you are a career provider or a volunteer provider, and both are critical as we look across the Commonwealth. Good to be here to talk about the problem. I'm encouraged by the actions. Nate just talked about the tremendous amount of work that the legislature has done to help fire first responders. The SR6 Commission was crafted 4 years ago, and they spent 2 years studying and then gave a report to the legislature. And now, as we come to the closing days of that 2-year session, we are seeing meaningful progress and significant accomplishments, which is a huge turnabout after 40 years of talking about it. So whether it was the Pennsylvania burning report back in the 70s or 20 years ago with the 60 resolution, these problems have been identified, and thankfully this legislature has moved forward and as Nate said, acted in the last just this week unanimously in both the House and the Senate to make some meaningful reforms and provide some significant assistance to the public safety community. I think all anxiously await the governor's action. Whether he will sign or allow to become law without his signature or veto. I think it's been largely quiet, not heard a whole bunch about what's going on there. But so I encourage all of you to reach out to the governor's office and encourage him to sign. We are, as we move forward as partners in local government and providing these services. I suspect we all sit back and we ask kind of the same questions, and a little bit of it is human nature. Why, we may ask ourselves, why do people ignore road closed signs and drive into standing water? Why do, when there's a traffic accident alongside the road, why does everybody else slow down and rubberneck and watch to see what's going on and maybe unfortunately cause additional accidents? And I suspect in some instances it's a bit of human nature, and people think that they are immune from things themselves, and they just start to take things for granted. But if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that you can't take anything for granted. We used to think that there were things that you just knew happened. When the school bell rang at the end of the day, the kids get to go home. Well, in this COVID world, that's not always the case. They don't even get to be in school sometimes now. Sometimes they are teaching at home. And I guess I raise the prospect of that concept of, when people call for help, when they call for an ambulance, they expect it's going to show up. And part of the discussion that's helped move the legislature over the course of the last 2 years is, realistically, what happens if that doesn't happen? What happens if you call 911 and it doesn't and nobody comes? And people, they come to take things for granted. They're, it's nice, and I'm pleased that they are recognizing first responders. I like to call them the red, white, and blue line of defense: fire, police, and EMS. But a lot of people take that for granted, and their perceptions of fire, police, and EMS is what they know sometimes from TV. So it's, they watch Chicago Fire, or they watch Emergency, or they watch LA Fire, or New York, and it's all the bigger cities and it's career departments that are there. They expect, and they don't realize that in Pennsylvania there is a huge amount of decentralization and customization and personalized service at community levels with a lot of volunteers, and how you go about serving them. So when their house is on fire, or the floodwaters are rising and coming towards their front door, or if they need a stop sign at a dangerous intersection, or they just want to call and find out get about getting their trash picked up, where do they call? I mean, you certainly don't call Washington for that. With all due respect to our friends in Harrisburg, you don't call Harrisburg for that either. You call your local providers, and whether that's through 911 or your municipal structure, that is where things get done. And not only are the services provided, but from a local government perspective, that's what we're accountable and responsible for doing too. And the federal and state government have roles. I like to say they provide the rules and the tools. Now, sometimes they're a little long on the rules and not so much on the tools. But I think in the last, this week, we've seen a tremendous amount of new tools coming to the table. So there's not a one size fits all solution for any of this. There's communities, what works in Erie may not work in Somerset, and neither of those things may work in Jim Thorpe. So it was important, I think, for the legislature to provide that menu of options, which they have. When we sit down and start talking about the challenges on the EMS side, oftentimes the conversations devolve quickly into funding and training. And training standards and escalation and more standards, and I'm just going to throw in a bit of an adult talk, because I know I believe everybody on the line here is an adult. Sometimes we got to be careful what we wish for, because perhaps some will suggest that the solutions that we demanded 20 years ago, and I was at the table, I was part of it, so I will acknowledge some responsibility for this. But the solutions that we asked for 20 years ago to fix things, increasing standards and professional, look, nobody wants people to not be safe and not be trained, but increasing the training standards and requiring 2 people per vehicle, and some of those mandates and requirements are the very things that today are causing challenges for continued survival. So those fixes from then are now things that we sometimes seek relief from. So as we move forward, I think it's important to not only address the problems of today, but also think about how those solutions may impact you in the future, and make sure we don't have a series of unintended consequences. On the funding side, demands are up, whether it's through mandates or equipment costs, or just wanting the latest bells and whistles in services or hardware. And it's important for a community to distinguish early on the difference between their wants and their needs. And part of that is driven by the same as it is with your family, is driven by ability to pay, because there are not unlimited dollars in the local stations. There are not unlimited dollars at the municipal level. There's not unlimited dollars at the state level. And despite all the printing of money that goes on in Washington, there really isn't unlimited dollars there either. So as we talk about having that partnership and that shared services, it's important, as Steve mentioned, to have those discussions, to have that communication, to have that, don't let your first visit or to your municipality be the day that you walk in to say, by the way, we got to go out of business. It's important to have those conversations in advance. It's important to have that transparency, whether that's through attending monthly meetings or an annual report. And it's a two-way street. Look, fire and EMS should not treat their municipality as though it's an ATM machine, but a municipality also should not take for granted their fire and EMS providers. I think those conversations early on as to whether you need or want a QRS or BLS or ALS and those requisite costs, they have different answers by community. But share information, share the reports with each other, and it's, as I said, the transparency will build trust, and the trust will build relationships, because at the end of the day, we're talking about accessing tax dollars, whether they're federal, state, or local, and somebody's got to be accountable for that. Now, it's a lot harder to hold the federal and state government elected officials accountable for some of that spending, but at the local level, it becomes easier. We pick up newspapers every day. And hope not to see a headline like in Eastern Pennsylvania where an EMS squad treasurer embezzled funds, or in central Pennsylvania where a fire chief embezzled funds, or in western Pennsylvania where a township secretary embezzled funds. I mean, unfortunately, in those things happen on occasion, but I would argue that if the more transparency there is between all the parties and relationships, and everybody's talking about it, the less that'll happen, because more and more people will be aware of what's going on, and it becomes harder to do because as the accountabilities are put in place. With the menu of options that have been afforded from a municipal level to help, I think are important. Whether it's the tax rebates and the cap coming off that, the federal CARES dollars, the state grant program, the loan program. Nate talked about all those. But and those were meaningful bills and expansion of services. But one of the things that's in that bill is there's also more people in the diner, if you will, and that it was the eligibility was expanded. So it may be the same size pie, and there's more people eating the pie. So the funding per unit may go down. So that's just something to watch as we look forward, and we continue to push the legislature to appropriately fund these issues moving forward. At the end of the day, the problem of providing this service is it's not a problem for the EMS system. It's not exclusive. It's not a problem for the municipality. It's a joint problem. And because the problem is a joint problem, the solution needs to be a joint solution as well. So encourage the partnerships. We've done a lot of specialized training, and Jerry Ozog is helping us do some training on the fire side. But we try and make clear to our municipal members, and this applies to boroughs, cities, and townships all across Pennsylvania, that we have that statutory responsibility to make sure communities are safe. And the delivery of these services, and we've got to make sure that stuff happens, and we've got to partner with the providers to make sure that happens. But it has to be that partnership, and I would encourage all of you to communicate and collaborate, as Steve said. And at the end of the day, we will all prevail and keep our community safe. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end.
David, thank you. I would like to remind everybody, if you would like to put your questions in the chat box a while, you can do that anytime. You don't have to wait till the end to do that. And please feel free to enter any questions you may have for David or any of our panelists today. I would now like to introduce Barry Albertson. And Barry, I apologize for my lapse there at the very beginning. I had next week's notes printed out as well as this week's notes, and I had a last-minute crisis of confidence as to whether I got my panelists mixed up. But in any event, somebody that I've been proud to know for, geez, Barry, sorry to throw us both under the bus here, but decades. Barry has over 40 years of experience in EMS, and he's going to give us the boots on the ground perspective. He is a past president of the Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania. He is currently on the board of directors of the AAP. He is a past president of the Eastern PA EMS Council, one of our EMS regional councils in Pennsylvania. Currently on the board of directors of the State Advisory Council, which is the Pennsylvania Emergency Health Services Council. And in addition to all of that, his day job is he is director of UPMC Community Life Team EMS, which of course is one of the largest and well-known EMS organizations here in central Pennsylvania and expanding. So we are very proud and privileged to have my longtime friend with us here today, Barry Albertson. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Doug, and thanks, Widener, for inviting me to this panel of prestigious of individuals. And I too live in Hamden Township, so Nate, I'm a new neighbor. So, Doug, in the interest of time, how do you want to do this? Because a lot of what I have to bring or say about municipalities and working together with municipalities, either Nate or Dave covered. So do you probably be in the interest of time to go to some questions if you have them?
Well, I do have some questions, and I would like to hear your thoughts, and I'll throw the first one to you to get the conversation started. And that is this age-old question, Barry, of local subsidy for EMS versus subsisting entirely on billing revenue. And it seems to me we have a little bit of a disconnect between the level of service that the public expects or demands and the revenues that can support that level of service. And David talked about, and Nate also talked about, the desire, how important it is to make sure we have a response network in place when somebody dials 911. But sometimes the public's expectations, hey, I called and, it's been 2 minutes. Where are you, right? Grandma can't breathe or whatever it is, doesn't match the reality of the resources we have to work with. And I just wondered if you could share your thoughts about whether you think EMS will be sustainable at the level the public expects based on the insurance revenues and the billing for those services, or whether or not that partnership with local government is going to have to step up and fill some of that void.
Well, my answer won't surprise anybody, and the answer is no. And I say that with this caveat, is that when I meet with the municipalities we serve, or some other municipalities, they would love to have as Dave referred to, love to have paramedics in every community, no matter how big or how small. They just would love to have a paramedic on and have that ambulance there, as you said, Doug, in 2 minutes. It's not sustainable at that level based on call volumes and those kind of factors, as we all know. The insurance companies, also referred to by Dave, is, we don't get the payments directly. There's always lag in getting payments. So the short answer is no. We are more apt, and years ago you might got away with that, but now the subsidies from the municipalities, no matter how small, are certainly part of what figures into the overall financial stability of the organization. And when you go to, and just to back onto what else was said, is when you go to have those conversations, do it sooner than later. Don't walk in with your hat in the hand saying, we're about broke, and here's why. And don't be surprised when the municipality, as I'm sure Nate will attest to, ask you questions like, where were you? And if you're going to ask for some funding, we'd like to see how that money's being spent, because it's their job to know how the money's being spent if they're going to hand it over to you. So the short answer is the expectations of the public doesn't meet the actual facts of what you can provide at what level.
Well, that's sobering, because that comes from the director of one of the best managed EMS operations in the Commonwealth. And, talk about being efficient and doing what you can with the resources you have. I think that's a sobering message that we should all take to heart. And I also want to point out that I think a key that two keys are transparency and relationships. And I think, Barry, what you pointed out goes both ways. And I would like to ask either David or Nate to jump in on that. And that is the issue of transparency and relationships, really. You can't knock on a municipality's door as an EMS agency with your hat in your hand when you have not established a prior relationship. And we heard that theme come up with the state legislators last week. And then there's no clear guidance on what, there's no state mandate that EMS agencies disclose their financial, resources and their income to their local agencies, but there is accountability that comes with the subsidies that they ask for. So I'd wonder if Nate or David would care to weigh in on those questions of transparency and relationships. Sure.
In terms of relationships, it's so very important to establish those sooner rather than later. I mean, it's still good to get that conversation rolling, even if it is last minute. But it still floors me that you go around the Commonwealth and there's municipalities and fire companies that haven't met face to face in years. And so it's very disconcerting that those conversations are not being had. And in Hamden Township, we try to have a face to face, at least once a year, if not more. And so that's important on that front. And same thing here with EMS, to be able to have the conversation and be upfront with each other on where things are at. And now in terms of budgeting, now's the time to be talking to your municipality as we prepare our budgets here for the 2021 fiscal year. So now is that time.
And I would add, Nate is right. Now is the time, but now is also the time to talk about next year and the year after that. To an earlier point raised about public expectations, while we all, municipal government and providers, need to have more communication between ourselves, we also have a joint responsibility to help educate the public, to help them understand their expectations or understand what their expectations cost. And if indeed they, as you said, and look, we all do, we call 911, and if grandma can't breathe, we want the ambulance there. But if that person was, at the municipal building a couple weeks earlier and railing against local officials saying, "Don't you dare raise my taxes," there are consequences and prices to be paid. So I think not only is it helpful for providers to help the local governments understand what they're investing in from the local share partnership, but it's equally important to help communicate and educate the public as to what they're investing in or why they should be investing, either through memberships, because there's a couple legs on the stool of funding EMS. I mean, the insurance group is one, memberships are another, and then grants, be they from the federal, state, or local, or the third. The insurance rates are established, perhaps too low. Memberships are voluntary choices, and the grants from the federal, state, and local are options that you have to make application for, and you've got to justify what those needs are. I mean, you're right. Somebody said that there's no requirement that you have to share your books or share why costs are what they are. But when you go to buy a car and they say it's $23,000. Or well, probably not for that price anymore. But you're going to ask why. What does it cost? What are the extras? How can I make that better? So it's the same, and there's no rule that says they have to tell you how they get there. But it's a common sense thing. If you want money, somebody to give you money, you got to explain what it's going to be used for and why.
Fair enough. And folks, since we're on Zoom, luckily the platform will not self-destruct if we go a couple of minutes over. But there's a viewer question here that I do want to take here, and I urge our participants to stay with us. We'll just go a few minutes here, but I want to throw this out first to Barry, and then any of the other panelists, David or Nate, who want to weigh in. But the question from a viewer is, we hear a lot of talk about the sustainability of EMS organizations, and of course SR6 and all of those issues. But there are going to be situations when the survival of a particular local EMS service may not necessarily be in the best interest of the health and safety of the community, because the organization may not be well run, it may not be financially solid, they may not be delivering good service. But those can be very difficult discussions to have, especially if you have a long-standing community-based or volunteer organization in those areas. The question is, what is the best way to have those discussions at the local level? And another viewer sort of asked that a very similar question: what's the best way that we can inspire and engage leaders to identify these local solutions, but particularly the difficult ones, as the first viewer asked. Barry, let me start with your thoughts about that. I know nobody wants to be seen as the big bad, the big organization coming in and taking over, but the question raises a serious issue, which is sometimes those local community organizations may not be the best solution for the safety of a community. So Barry, can you kick us off on that briefly?
Sure, and let me maybe rephrase that a little bit, is that whether they're the best solution for that municipality, if they're in the municipality and been there a long-standing tradition, I've always found it best to go in and meet with that organization. What typically happens, someone in the municipality leadership calls or asks questions, maybe of another organization outside their current organization, says, "Hey, we're struggling. What can you tell us?" Maybe trying to get some background. I've always felt it best to meet with that municipality along with the ambulance service, so that you can get everybody in the room and have quite honestly, a transparent conversation that says, here's what the municipality is concerned about. We're here to help. How can we help that local municipality and that local ambulance service do better? Sometimes you're right, Doug. Sometimes it's just a little bit of knowledge and understanding maybe what they could do better. Sometimes there's just dysfunction among the ranks, and sometimes it's truly just a financial issue. But again, we're back to having someone come in, maybe mediate that, or have another organization talk to the smaller organization, say, how can we help you? And then maybe take that message to the municipality and say, here's an idea. But again, it's back to what Steve started the whole conversation with at 9 o'clock, was crossing that gap and having those tough conversations and being as transparent as possible. And it takes a couple of meetings. It's not going to happen at the first meeting because, as you know, and everyone on this phone call knows, walking into that room the first time is not the most comfortable. But if you can continue the conversations, and there's going to be stumbling blocks, you eventually will get to where you want to be. And it may be that that organization decides, you know what, we really can't do this anymore. We may just have to do something different, or the municipality decides that. But at least it's based on some common ground. And I've always found that's the best way to approach it. Going in and just shutting things down or doing certain things just doesn't seem to always work out very well for anybody.
Excellent. David, can you share any thoughts you have on that issue?
I wholeheartely agree, but I would say that it's early and often is the key, I think, for that communication. Look, there should be no more of no one should expect a positive outcome from a squad walking into a local government building and saying, you know, give us money tonight or we're going out of business. Then that's no more acceptable than the local government saying, oh, by the way, we're not going to give you any money this year. You need to have that communication early, frequently. And if you do that, I mean, I kind of say it's similar to a personnel action. If you're an employer or an employee, if there's been good supervision and good understandings of expectations and relationships, when the day comes to either get a raise or to get fired, neither side should be surprised, because you should have seen it coming and would have had the conversations. And if you don't have the conversations and there are surprises, that's when bad things happen.
Well said. Nate, let me go to you for any final thoughts before we go into our wrap up here.
Yeah, look, again, conversation is so important, not just at the municipal level, but even at the multi-municipal level. To get the conversation rolling in one municipality like Hampden Township, is important. But if we can work with our neighboring municipalities, all the better. Pennsylvania has a rich history of local government. 2,560, I think, is the number of local governments right now. And, we do work together, though. And, there's other entities such as the councils of governments that mentioned earlier, COGS, that are so important to help facilitate some of these discussions as well amongst municipalities. In our capital region, the Capital Region Council of Government, 40 municipalities come together, work on items of importance to share costs and ultimately save the taxpayer money. And if we can have those conversations earlier, the better, not just, between my municipality and a neighboring municipality, but if it's something of regional significance, then we can have that conversation at the COG level and ultimately come to some solution. We talked earlier about the countywide concept for public safety authorities, and I'm so pleased that some of these conversations are happening. And there should be concerns about that, and there are concerns about that we need to work through in terms of this new possible new method here of addressing fire or EMS countywide. But through working together, through having these conversations, we can get there.
Excellent. Well, folks, thanks for sticking on with us for a few extra minutes here this morning. I'd like to thank PCN for their interest in our program. I'd also like to thank Widener University Commonwealth Law School for their steadfast support of veterans, first responders, in the EMS community. I'd like to thank our panelists today, Nate Silcox, David Sanko, and Barry Albertson, our keynote speaker, Steve Wirth, and particularly for his flexibility in moving his presentation to this week, and remind everybody that the third and final panel in this series will be held on Friday, October 30th. That's a week from today at the same time, 9 a.m. And you'll make sure you receive your links from the law school and that you're registered through the law school for that link. Again, thank you to everybody for attending. Thank you to all the EMS community for the work you're doing every day. And at this point, that concludes today's session. Thanks, everybody.